artificial intelligence will completely transform our world. But what is AI? Why will it affect you? And how can you and your business survive and thrive through the AI revolution? Welcome to AI and You. Here is your host, author, speaker, and futurist, Peter Scott.
We are on episode 306, and I have been talking with Rob May, returning to the show after almost exactly 5 years, a bit too long, I would say, about how AI is shifting the business landscape and especially at the inference stage. Rob is co-founder and CEO of Neurometric AI, optimizing inference for multi-model AI systems. A serial entrepreneur, Rob has founded and scaled multiple successful companies, including Backupify, Tala, Dianthus, and BrandGuard. He's also an active angel investor with over 100 portfolio companies and brings insight into the evolution of AI entrepreneurship. His expertise lies at the intersection of AI research, applied inference, and startup strategy. He's also the co-host of the AI in NYC show. Last week, we talked about how the bottleneck in business is shifting from labor to cognition. The paradoxical way AI is increasing workloads and cognitive strain, the rise of inference as the core AI economy, and how infrastructure constraints are pushing towards a more distributed AI ecosystem. This week, we're going to talk about AI processing on local devices, natural limits to automation, the shift in competitive advantage from execution to creativity, and restructuring of the economy and the workforce. So let's get back into the interview with Rob May. Why are some of the more prominent names historically in computing that are still with us not part of this conversation? Why are we not talking about Amazon and Oracle and IBM and Apple as competitors in the model space?
Wow, different reasons for all of those. I think IBM has actually been very early on a lot of stuff. I think they've had some good tools and some good patents. They are perceived as more in line with like a more technical version of a McKinsey or Bain rather than a tech company these days, I think is how the market views them. And so the challenge is I think they're not taken seriously by model builders and developers outside of probably the Fortune 100 because they don't use IBM for anything. Startups aren't going to build on their platform. IBM's been very innovative. You know, they have a model called Granite that is a state space transformer mix, just sort of two types of architectures, which is pretty cool and useful for certain types of tasks. I don't know what happened to Amazon and why they haven't led here. I mean, they were early with Alexa. They have AI product recommendation engines are like great experimental fields for them. My guess is they've just gotten a little more profitability focused rather than innovation focused. Something like that since Jeff Bezos left as the founder. But I don't know for sure what's gone on in there. Maybe there's been other types of internal chaos. Maybe they've gotten so big and sprawling that it's just, it's hard to manage anything. Apple, well, let's talk about Oracle. Oracle's always late to everything other than databases. Wasn't it Larry Ellison who as late as like 2011, 2012 was still saying like cloud didn't make any sense or something? I think they buy their way into markets. I think that's the perception. And so I think they were late to partnering with some of these frontier model labs, and I think they'll continue to be late. Doesn't mean they won't be successful. It's just a slightly different game that they play. And then Apple is interesting because Apple has a different set of assets for AI that everybody else has, right? They're the world's leading device manufacturer. The iPhone, at least in North America, is the dominant device that most people have. They've been very smart about hardware-software integration. And so I think they've struggled to recruit AI talent during the last sort of decade wave of AI because they don't publish much research. And AI people really like to publish, even when they work for big companies. So I don't know what's going to happen to them there, but I don't think they need a heavy cloud presence. I don't think they need a chatbot. It is interesting to see, they cut this deal with Google to use Gemini instead of sort of developing their own set of models there. It's an interesting strategic decision. My guess is they've looked at it and said that's not a skill set that they need. It's a bet that models are going to become commoditized and they're not going to be hurt by not having something proprietary. It's probably their point of view on the world. But I think they're more focused. My guess is that as we move to edge devices and edge AI and are doing more on your device and in that kind of privacy focused thing, I think Apple will do really well.
Now you go way back as a hardware geek and chips and looking at the environment today with so much hinging on NVIDIA, and breakthroughs like a Canadian company recently came out with a way of putting a model on a chip, getting a 10x speed up, things like that. What does the chip landscape look to you like at the moment in terms of where that's going? And obviously a lot of data center infrastructure is riding on that.
Yeah, I was a little too early on this. I made some personal investments in some of these chip companies as early as 2017. And the ones that have panned out have been through sort of recapitalizations and all that. So like some right theses, wrong timing. When I came out of school, it didn't make sense to build an ASIC except for military and space applications because it just wasn't cost effective. And now there's so much hardcore compute again with AI workloads that people are starting to think about it. And so I think you're going to see a lot of people and a lot of companies be successful here, not just Grok, which has so far. It seems like Samba Nova is having some success. I'm an investor in a company called Mythic that I think is going to be, they're having some success. It hasn't been publicly announced yet, I think we'll say, but I think will be a leading edge AI player. And then you have a lot of people in XP and Qualcomm and groups that are doing interesting stuff on AI compute at the edge. And so I think you're going to see, as workflows move to models, move to hardware through that chain, everything's not going to be transformer based. I mean, people still run convolutional neural nets. People still run SVMs and other simple machine learning tasks. And as people want to do more of that on the edge, I think you're going to see a fragmentation in the chip ecosystem. So I think you'll have a lot of successful players.
Is there a prospect for moving it out to my side of the edge? I'm looking at a MacBook M4 and conscious of the fact that it's got a neural engine on it that's got a lot of compute, which I think is not used most of the time, but happily let that get a bit warmer in return for executing some of the things that I'm tasking other people's AIs with. Is there a way to bring some of this inference down to consumer devices? That sounds crazy when I say that, but might as well ask.
I think so. I think the chips are getting better. You have some weird, the reason that these models are hard to run is because these models are very big by computer program standards. Much, much bigger than an operating system or something that you would think of as being a big, large computer program. And for every layer in the neural network, for every task, you have to load the layer from memory into the compute grid. You have to calculate it. You have to write it back out to memory, load in the next thing, right? And so you have to do that very fast, millions of times. People are innovating ways around that bottleneck. The problem is, one of the best ways around it is to use more on-chip SRAM. On-chip SRAM doesn't shrink down very well. And so as you make these smaller chips, the SRAM circuit doesn't really shrink. It just becomes a larger proportion of the chip footprint. So there's some fundamental limits right now to what we can do without solving that problem. But there are a lot of people working on stuff. People are making better small models. So say 8 billion parameter and smaller models in terms of what they can do and be trained for specific tasks. So I think that's going to help. So I think it'll come. I think we'll be able to do more on our laptops, even when we're not cloud connected. Definitely more on our phones, because there's a lot of incentive for people to solve those problems, right? Phones are a big part of our lives. So yeah, it's coming. It's a little bit harder and a little bit slower, but I think it's coming.
What do you think of OpenClaw? That's got some local side compute that made Mac Minis suddenly the hottest ticket.
Yeah. Honestly, it's hard for me to understand. I don't think it's a very novel idea. I've seen lots of stuff like it. I don't know why that particular project got so popular. They're related things. I mean, AutoGPT is a couple years old and does some similar stuff. I realize OpenClaw has more sort of connections built in and everything else. It's a security nightmare and it's difficult to install. So I'm on a lot of email groups about this, and it seems like there's a lot more downloads than there are successful installations. So I think what you'll see come next is variants of OpenClaw that are more supported, easier to install and manage, more enterprisey. I mean, I do think it's a good step towards agent building, and these are the types of infrastructures that we need. But I think that particular project, I sort of don't understand the randomness of why that one has been so successful.
Well, sometimes when you put a smiley face on something, it becomes a lot more popular. Like the first Macs, you turn it on and, oh, look, it's smiling at me. You feel better there. And there's some of that anthropomorphism to OpenClaw that has grabbed news cycles for sure. And if we could take the cuteness out of it and make the premise of it, which is something that learns continuously to do what you want, and we could make it safe and not do some of the obvious fails that have been publicized recently. Well, where do you think that's going? I think OpenAI thinks that's where it's going because they hired the creator of OpenClaw to do that.
Ooh, really good question. And you're getting here into some like interesting AI adoption patterns. So I will tell you, as somebody who's had an executive assistant at multiple points in my career as a CEO, I think most people don't understand the limits of what an assistant can do for you, because at some point, like at what point do you stop delegating decisions? What do you do with your time? I'll give you an example. It's definitely helpful to have an assistant who says, you're like, look, I need to go to LA from New York. I need to be there at this time for this thing. You know, my general flight preferences, book me a flight versus send me some options and I'll tell you which one to book. I have not had somebody I would trust to just book me a flight. And that's even a human. So I would not trust the bot to do it. And it's the same way with like make me a restaurant reservation at a good place for Valentine's Day. And then you show up and you go, well, this isn't what I wanted. And so like at some level, somebody can only know so much of your preferences, right? And there's a trade-off between like, well, if I have to spend 20 minutes to tell you what I want out of a trip, I can probably find and book the trip myself in 20 minutes.
I'm the same way, but I put it down to being a control freak.
Yeah. And so it's like, particularly if you have unusual preferences where it's like, the longer the flight, the more I want an aisle seat so I can get up and go to the bathroom easily, right? And it's hard for me to give somebody a rule like 3 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours, I don't know. So there's a lot of things in there. So I think one of the things that's going to happen is I think people are going to realize you can only offload so much of your life, or you just start to get, I don't even know what you get, but like, what are you going to do, right? When the AI can do everything for you, what are you going to do with your time? Do you want to choose a restaurant yourself? Like, I think some people like looking at the menus and looking at the pictures and deciding where to go. So an AI can book that for you, but do you want it to do it all? And what are we all going to do? Just doom scroll on TikTok all day and watch funny videos? I don't know.
I think we could find things. I mean, by analogy, I like the fact that I can have GPS in my car tell me how to get somewhere, and I don't have to expend brain cycles figuring out routes and alternatives and wondering about traffic. And I don't worry whether that ability is even atrophying, because now I can spend that time and those brain cells thinking about something else, which I generally find to be a better use of that time. That certainly is a general principle here, right?
Yeah, but there also are limits to that, right? I mean, it's nice to have an automated thing that'll remind you to send flowers to your wife. But if you're going to have a bot that's going to chat with her every night so that you don't have to, and you're going to have a bot that's a robot that's going to, at some point, it's like, why have the relationship? You know what I mean? Yeah. So there's limits to some of these things, I think. I think people have this idea that like these tools are going to automate everything and it's going to be awesome. And it's like, no, like at some level, I think everybody's going to want some level of control. And I think if you talk to people and you use the EA example, I think what you would find consistently is that a lot of people, there's certain simple things they like to give to an EA, but there's very few people that really have had successful sort of like life managers, that really can do that kind of stuff.
What are the things in your business, your workflows, your daily life where you think, I wish something could take this off my hands?
Honestly, it's the administrative stuff around starting and maintaining a business, man. I don't know about everybody listening to this podcast, but I get this like bills all the time from like CT Corp, right? And it's like, hey, you have this LLC out there and this annual fees due. And I'm like, didn't I pay this like 3 months ago? And, I have a bunch of LLCs and I get them all the time. And people could just mail me bills that look similar to that and I'd probably pay them, right? Like, I don't,
do you want us to cut that part out?
Yeah. And it's like, somebody just manage all that stuff. Like filing my taxes every year is still something that I can give everything to the accountants. They're going to come back with a million questions for me. Like I still can't totally offload it. And I wish I could, because I really don't like those administrative tasks. But they will say, we need to know, how much time did you travel, blah, 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 this year? And they'll ask a bunch of questions. So,
well, and this is where the challenge is in AI integration, as it would be in integrating an intern or a new hire or a new assistant, is figuring out that interface. It's the question people keep asking is, can they do the whole thing? And as soon as they have some evidence that it can't do the whole thing, they think it's useless for any of it. but that's not the
Yeah.
point. The point is figuring out what that interface is where you know which of the 100 things or the 1,000 things you can delegate and which you shouldn't.
Right. Yeah. I do see a lot of people cut back on work as these tools can automate some of the basic money-making processes for people. I had Gemini do a great strategic review of a possible new product for me in like 14 minutes this morning. Like it was pretty amazing. So that's interesting to think about, you know.
What does it mean for that kind of business now that everyone else who has that question can get an answer in 14 minutes for basically free?
I think what's going to happen there is I think you're going to see execution matter less. You know, there's been this thing that we said for decades, which is ideas are a dime a dozen. Execution is what matters. And I don't think that's going to be the true anymore. I think it's going to be how fast can you test ideas to see what's valuable? How many ideas do you have? Who's creative? How do you know to ask the AI what to look for and what to do? You know, so it's definitely going to compress. I think it's going to raise up the bottom. I think it's going to be harder to really stand out. But yeah, it'll be interesting.
Can we reduce this to an aphorism of saying that as thinking becomes cheaper, then doing becomes more important?
Yeah, a lot of the doing becomes more automated as well, though, right? So, interesting. I'm not sure where it's going to end up. You get a lot of different variables at play. It'll probably be, you know, there's this concept in AI called the jagged frontier that came out of a 2023 research paper out of Harvard Business School and Wharton, some professors at those two places. And I think that's what you're going to see. I think you're going to see pockets of the economy where AI can do almost the whole thing, and pockets of the economy where it's going to struggle, not because AI can't do the task, because the task doesn't lend itself to being computationally feasible, right? It's more random, it's more human interactive, it's more something like that. I mean, do you want to go see a Broadway show with a bunch of robots?
I hadn't thought about that one. Oh, well, you mean in the audience or on the stage?
Yeah, you know, on the stage. Like it just might not be as meaningful if you...
Oh, definitely.
I mean, part of what's impressive about watching humans perform is you're looking at the best of the best, right? And you're saying, man, the way Keith Richards plays guitar is just awesome, and I wish I could do that. But if you put robots up there, they can just do everything. Like, this is not impressive. Yeah, and so there's some, I think, intellectual parallels there to work. I don't know that exactly what they are, but you get my drift. Well, like there's some things where, like, even if the AI can do it, do you want it, and are we better as a society because the AI does it? I'm not sure.
Well, and that lands in the creativity conversation, and it matters there when the author of the creator of the work is evident. So going to a concert and the orchestra is composed of robot players is not going to work. But if you're watching a movie and the soundtrack, which is there to augment your emotional response to it, it's not the thing you came there for, it's a component of it. If that were created by an AI, if that were played by an AI, you would neither know nor care. So maybe there are parallels to that in business as well.
Yeah, no, that is true, right? So I think people will like AI for support. I'm not sure they're ever really like AI for sales. I think you want to feel like, particularly if you have some kind of consultative sale where you need to ask a lot of questions, I think you want to feel like it's another human.
Sometimes that actually changes. I'm reminded of some old studies or surveys that showed in some places that people preferred AI financial analysts to human ones. And recently, some conversation with students, given the choice between a human teacher and AI teacher, some of them in some contexts wanted an AI teacher. It depends on the human. We also have studies against showing that, at least when they measured it, that AIs produced better diagnoses than human doctors.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think for quite some time, the combination of humans and machines together will be the best. Will be the best for those reasons. But I also think, like, the sidebar to all this is, I think when you look out 10 or 12 or 15 years, I think you will see an entire agent economy where the agents sell things to each other and agents are consumers and all that. And so like, who knows what happens then?
Right. Death of the World Wide Web predicted news at 11, because it will be almost pointless to build a traditional website if the thing that needs to consume it, or the things that need to consume it the most, are agents. and then they have to go through all this extra work to ignore your flashy animations and audio introductions and pictures of your team. They've just come there to find out how to fix a problem with one of your products. So we would then want to develop sites, wouldn't want to call them websites, but interfaces for chatbots to provide that information directly and rethink the whole question of what is it that we want the humans to see and why.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that'll definitely happen.
Let's imagine we're having this conversation a year from now and you are looking back, and what do you think is the most likely big change to have happened in that time?
I think you will see, honestly, I'll tell you what, I'll offer something a little contrarian. I think you will see companies hiring again because of AI, that are laying off because of AI, because I think part of the reason the layoffs are happening is people have not thought about how to reconfigure their workflows, and they're sort of wedging AI into what they have. And I think you're going to see companies that are really AI native can do so much more. And I don't think they're going to be hiring like super fast or in the kinds of ways that they were in previous tech ways. But I think this idea that you're not going to need people and young people aren't going to have jobs, I think that's going to pass. And I think we're going to get to the other side of it.
This is worth dwelling on because it's a big thing at the moment. I mean, just recently you had Blocks, company I wasn't familiar with, but got a lot of press for laying off 40% of its workforce, saying this is because of AI. Now, if that scales across the whole economy, I have two reactions. One is if those people don't find work somewhere else, who's going to buy the products, or how are they going to afford the products of the people that are in business? And number two, if AI was a transformative technology like we have talked about so much, wouldn't it grow the economy and the market so that you could keep those people employed and make even more money?
It should, in theory, right? I mean, there's limits, AI can't make concrete dry any faster. So, it can't pour parking lots or bridges necessarily faster. But it could definitely help you design them faster. It could probably help you through the permitting process. Like it could maybe speed up projects that take years to months or months to weeks. But it's not going to ever put up a bridge in a new place in 2 days. So you're not going to have the kind of thing that you have in coding where a project that would have taken you 6 weeks to build, you can now build in 6 hours. But yeah, I think that productivity should lead to lots of improvements, and some of that will lead back to hiring as well. People have to remember that when everybody becomes more productive, a lot of times just the margins compress and the consumers get the surplus of that. The companies actually don't make any more money. Those productivity gains get competed away between the players.
Okay, sort of like grocery chains getting so efficient at what they do that their margins shrink just to be able to stay competitive.
Yeah, margins sort of shrink down to the level of capital deployed that you can get a return on that makes sense, right? So if all the grocery stores go out and hire a bunch of robots, like that's great. They don't need as much labor. But when everybody does it, it only takes one person to be like, you know what, these robots move my net margins from 3% to 8%. I'm going to undercut everybody. I'll take 7% net margins.
And then they all do it.
And then somebody goes, I'll take 6. And people go back down to the level where their capital generates a return. So that's what happens a lot of times with these new technologies are applied to certain markets.
What do you think those jobs will be then if we're not losing them? What do entry-level jobs look like? How would you characterize the roles for humans in a more mature AI economy?
Well, it's going to depend on what the AI does and how, but I'll give you an example. I think even in the advent of higher level programming languages, when you go to college to study computer programming, you typically have a course where you touch on assembly language. Hey, how does assembly language work? And then how does C work? And then you get up to Python and whatever. And so I think you're still going to see some of that. And I think you'll have these apprenticeship programs. So I think people will come in, and I think they won't be paid the starting salaries maybe for engineering that you've been paid historically, but it'll be like, well, you're going to babysit the AI. You're going to write some code yourself for 2 years. We're not going to let you use the AI full time. You have to prove you can do it manually and that you understand it. And then as you do that, we're going to turn you over and make you more productive with AI. But like, you run the risk of, it's very common. A lot of parents make their kids learn how to change a tire. You really don't need to know that skill in this day and age because you can call AAA, somebody will do it for you. There's roadside assistance is everywhere, all that stuff. But it's not a bad thing to learn. because it helps you learn a little bit how cars work. If you never think about it or never talk about it, how do you even know if you have a flat tire? Like maybe your kid's just driving and they're like, I don't know. I feel like I hear a little bump over there and it feels bumpy. I don't know what that means. So I think there's still some exposure that you need to certain concepts. And yeah, I think you'll see that. And look, some humans want certain things. I mean, look at clothes, right? 200 years ago, we all made our own clothes. So we had to do. And then we got mass production of clothes, and that was great. Now, if you can have a human make you a tailored suit, you're very well off. And I think you'll see some of that come back. Oh, you have a human do it. Wow, you have a human chef instead of a robot? Ooh, status symbol, right? Like, I think you'll see some of that.
And yet, we'll go through at least a phase of the reverse of that. There will be people who will have a robot in the entry foyer of their mansion to take the coats of visitors as a way of showing that they've got one of those.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, but you look at something like Tesla, right? When they innovated with the first real electric car, it was super popular. And now my kids think it's an old person's brand. They don't think it's cool. They think Rivian and Lucid are much cooler companies. And Tesla sales seem to be struggling. You could argue that's for other reasons than the product and people's perception of Elon. But Elon's talking about merging it in with his other companies now because it might not be the novel, high growth thing that it once was. And so everything's going to go through that.
This was something I wanted to ask earlier. Did you have a moment after generative AI went ballistic where you used something, ChatGPT or something else, and you were like, holy cow, I didn't think it could do that? Does anything like that stand out in your mind?
Not for a long time, not until probably last fall. In general, I was not very impressed with these tools. I found a lot of limitations. I've written a newsletter since 2016 on AI, and I continue to write it myself. As of last fall, I would finally use the AI to edit, help me with drafts and stuff like that. But the thing that happened that I thought was finally cool was, so the thing I hate to make is I hate to make presentations. I hate to make PowerPoints. I'm no good at it. I don't have good visual sense. I never know what to put on the slide. So I would use these tools to do it, and I could never quite get what I wanted. What would typically happen is I would create a PowerPoint. It would be 80% of what I wanted. I couldn't get it to exactly what I wanted. I would try to mess around with it. That would prove futile, and then I would hire a designer to fix it. But I would say as of last fall, you could tell, at least Google Gemini, you could tell things like, hey, take that yellow text in the header and make it green. No, make it darker green. And it worked, and it wouldn't screw everything else up. That was the first time I was pretty impressed. The ability to iterate on something that you created, when that became a thing a couple of months ago, that was the first time I was really, really impressed with these generative AI tools.
I had something almost identical to that in the last couple of months. I wanted infographics about various aspects of AI, like training, fine-tuning, and inference phases. And I don't have that visual sense of even what the structure of those things should look like. So I just put it into Gemini Nano Banana and said, I want something that does this, and PowerPoint aspect ratio and black background. And what it came up with was beyond perfect, because I could never have done that. I could have gotten a graphic designer to do it, but of course now you're looking at expenses. In seconds, it did something that was flawless to my mind. For an image generator to even get text right is a major achievement. So same kind of experience. Anyway, coming up on the end of our time here, where do you see Neurometric going from here? What are your hopes, goals, dreams, and realities for that?
Well, we've done some interesting research on small language models. And in fact, we've trained a few small models to beat frontier models on specific tasks. Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I think you're going to see us automate that process for customers. And so I think my vision of what this could become is you have an agentic workflow. It's built on a frontier model. You plug in Neurometric, and over a series of weeks, we watch what your agent does. And we create a series of models that you own that are custom to your workflows. And those things run faster. They run cheaper. In some cases, they'll be even more accurate. Yeah, I think it'll be pretty awesome.
Terrific. Let me know. And where should our listeners go to find out more about what you're doing?
Just neurometric.ai. The company is spelled Neurometric.
Great. We'll put a link to that in the show notes and the transcript. Well, Rob, May, thank you very much for coming back on AI and You. It's been a pleasure. We should do this more often, and good luck.
Thanks for having me, Peter. We'll come back next year and check on my prediction.
It's a deal. That's the end of the interview. In today's news, ripped from the headlines about AI, using AI for civic engagement showed up in a negative way recently when tens of thousands of emails poured into the South Coast Air Quality Management District, Southern California's top air pollution authority, as its board weighed a June proposal to phase out gas-powered appliances. The board typically looks at single-digit levels of public comments, and this onslaught helped result in the proposal being defeated. Yet later spot checks of the email's senders found that 3 out of 5 had no knowledge of the letters, which were much more individualized than the sort of boilerplate that characterized previous orchestrated campaigns. Samuel Woolley, a researcher at the University of Pittsburgh, said, "What we're seeing with AI is absolutely the next step in digital astroturfing," using the term there for the faking of grassroots interest. Next week, my guest will be Jeremy Ney, the author of a forthcoming book about opportunity and inequality in America. That's next week on AI and You. Until then, remember, no matter how much computers learn how to do, it's how we come together as humans that matters.
That's all for this episode of AI and You. Please leave a rating and comment and share with your friends. Get the book Artificial Intelligence and You and see more videos and articles at aiandyou.net. That's aiandyou.net, where you can also send us your questions. Thank you for listening.